this tier list is about new players or veterans that want to play a new class. I'm talking here how easy it is to get into this class, mostly from a PvE perspective, because that's what you will probably start out with if you're a new player. But I will also take into consideration what kind of builds might be played in competitive modes. So this is more about how hard is it to get into the class. I'm not talking about a specific build. I'm not talking about one thing only. I'm talking about the class in general. How hard it is to understand the class mechanic, how many different skills you have to learn maybe, that kind of stuff. So we have obviously very hard to very easy tier, nothing too crazy. For me, I have to say, of course, as a veteran, nothing is very hard. Nothing even gets close to it. I'm just saying for a new player, some classes might be quite confusing. Let's start with the medium armor classes. I don't know, for no reason. So we have Engineer. I think Engineer, Core Engineer, has baseline quite an interesting mechanic with the kits. You don't have a weapon swap, but you have the kits. And the kits can be quite challenging to understand because you have so many different ones. They are not very... You don't have to use them. If you don't use them, you're actually very easy to learn. But you have the tool belt skills. So I think Engineer is actually already medium. I think it's not very easy to learn. It's not very hard. You don't have to use the kits, but the tool belt skills make it a little bit more... Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Engineer is... I wouldn't recommend Engineer to players that don't want to play a Pinano, just because you have a lot of buttons to press all the time. I agree, actually. It feels a little bit challenging for a new player for the most part if you play Engineer. On the other hand, you have Scrapper. I think Scrapper is not more challenging than the Core Engineer. I would say actually Scrapper is... If you just come from a Core Engineer, I think Scrapper is actually getting a little bit easier because you might have... You know, it's not like you start as an engineer and then you slowly understand the class and then you get to Scrapper, and Scrapper is not harder. I think Scrapper is actually making the class a little bit easier. It's a very easy class to play, in my opinion, if you understand the core concept of Engineer. That's the weird part here. Core Engineer is from a medium, but Scrapper is not a big step or almost no step up. So it's, for me, that's why you could make the argument, yes, if the core class is medium, you can't put it into medium tier. I would say for me, it's actually easier to understand than the core class. Holosmith can be quite hard to learn because you have the kits, you have the forge mechanic. So yeah, I agree. Scrapper is very smooth what it provides. I think Holosmith, on the other hand, can be quite challenging. I think Holosmith is probably medium, maybe even hard. I don't know, depending on what kind of build you play. If you refer to a Condi Holosmith in PvE, it's insane how many buttons you have to press. I would say it's medium for me, but it's definitely harder than a Scrapper to play. Yeah. So you can see where I'm going. Engineer is quite medium focused. It's a medium armor class that is actually not that easy to play, so it's actually medium for me. But we have Mechanist, and Mechanist is, for me, very easy. You get carried by your pet and you lose your tool belt skills. You don't have to use kits at all. You get broken utility skills with signets. For me, Engineer, Mechanist is by far the easiest of the Engineer specs. That's very clear. Yeah, I would actually agree that Holosmith is very squishy as well. That makes it actually even harder. But I can see why you would say it's not that easy because you have so many buttons that you can press, but you can actually... It's true in World vs. World, but like I said in the beginning, I think I will focus here on PvE because that's where people typically start out playing a new build, you know? You don't say, oh, I'm playing... I leveled the Guardian to level 80 and now I'm trying Engineer, but I will not play it in PvE. I will instantly try it in PvP or World vs. World. That's not very common, you know. A new player will probably start in PvE to test the class. Yeah, that's why I think I would say I focus on PvE content here for now. Because if I also put the World vs. World and PvP in here, it gets very confusing very fast. Because you have so many builds that I have to consider. But that's what I would put Engineer in. Then we have Thief. Thief has a lot of dodges. It's very evasive. It's fast-paced. And it has very easy spammable attacks, but it's very punishable. It has a low health pool. It is not as, you know, survivable when it gets hit. So I think Thief is, from the medium armor classes, one of the harder specs to play because it's actually getting very fast, you know, to actually press all your buttons. You have only then you can evade your attacks all the time. So I think for me, Core Thief is, maybe it's easy because you only have one F skill. So that's not, you don't have a lot to learn, you know. That's the difference to Holosmith and Core Engineer. And you can also use Stealth, that's true. Then we have Daredevil. I would say Daredevil is probably the same. It's also quite easy to understand. And you just have the dodge that is altered. Everything else is the same. So maybe Thief is there. Then we have Deadeye. I would say Deadeye to start out with. For the class mechanics, I would put into medium. But you have the unload build and that's just easy. So for me, Deadeye in PvE is easy. That's just the truth, yeah. Because you have the unload build. That's carrying this. It's just, if you follow this build guide, it's actually insane. But if you look at the class itself, I think the mechanic makes it more complicated than Core Thief or Daredevil. But it gets carried a lot by how you actually can make it completely brain AFK. Yeah, exactly. You just start blasting when you press the unload button and then you can take your hands off the keyboard. So yeah, I don't know. Then we have Spectre. So Spectre is hard. Spectre is really hard. I think Spectre, for me to place, you have to think about two things. I think the survivability of a Spectre is insane. It's probably the highest survivability of all the Thief specs. So that makes it easier. But on the other hand, you typically play it as some kind of hybrid support, and that makes it actually harder to play. Because you have to understand to target your allies. You have to understand your flip over skills. So it's really hard. I think, is it a class that I would put into hard because it has some really gimmicky and really unique mechanics? Or is it a class that gets carried by your shroud, by your tankiness, by your overall survivability? What do I value more for a new player? Probably the playstyle, I have to be honest. If you can't play very, you know, effective, but you are tanky, you will still not get your things done. So maybe I would put Spectre for that matter into hard, because it's very focused on supporting your allies. If you play a full DPS Spectre, it's probably going into low medium tier because you don't have to support your allies, you can target the boss. But if you want to get used to the supportive element of Spectre, then it gets actually harder, I have to say. If you want to see showcases of all the classes and elite specs that are mentioned in this tier list, be sure to check out this video, which showcases every single class and gives you a small description how it plays in every single game mode. Then we have Ranger. Ranger is interesting. Like I said, I think Ranger is quite easy to learn. I think Core Ranger to get into, not a lot of different things. It's very straightforward, I would say. You have your pet and it does its job. You can call it to you and follow you and stuff, but it's very straightforward what it actually does. I think Ranger, quite easy, probably the easiest core class of those, because it's very, your pet can carry you through the beginning for sure. Then we have Soul Beast. I think Soul Beast makes the pet go away, so it makes actually sense to put it in easy or very easy as well, because you lose the difficult mechanic and you don't get carried by your pet anymore, but you get empowered by your pet. You get better skills, you get better stats. So I think it's still easy to play, especially when you run Dolyak stance and that kind of stuff, because it's absolutely broken. As if you play a DPS Soul Beast, you can make a very low intensity build that does high amount of damage. So I think Soul Beast is very underrated as a very easy build to pick up. Of course, if you go for fractal speedruns, that's different. Then it's actually quite hard to play, because you have to really know when you're facing, when you do your X5 and stuff, but I'm talking about the beginning, and I think Soul Beast is very good to start out with. Then we have Untamed. I would say Untamed is interesting. Untamed is, from the amount of buttons and amount of skills that you have to learn, actually quite challenging. But in PvE, it typically plays out, you just press all your buttons and you will be unkillable. So where do I put it now because of that? I don't really know. I would say in medium, because you have to learn your skills if you want to know what you're actually doing. But you can also just face roll your keyboard and then it will be easy and actually broken in PvE. I don't even know if it's maybe you should put it because of that in easy tier, because it's so broken what you can actually make work out of Untamed. So is it that broken that you can put it in easy tier, even though you have so many different buttons that you have to learn? But is it I don't know. I think it's actually, for me, let's put it in medium tier, even though it's very busted how much you can get done with that, yeah. And then we have Druid. Druid is interesting. I think Druid is also quite easy to actually get into. You have your Celestial Avatar and you have a flip over skill. It's very self-healing capabilities are crazy good. I think the group events and in strikes and raids, you can actually help a lot. So I think you don't have to be a crazy good Druid to actually make this spec work. I would agree with you, Jenna, that Untamed is very broken how much you can get done, but it's also not very, if you want to know all the intricacies about Untamed, the ambush mechanic, about the flip over, unleash stuff that your pet gets, and you have so many buttons for your pet to control it, I think it's not as easy as you would expect, but I think you are right, it's so broken that you might put it in easy because of that. And I think Druid is also quite easy to learn. You can see Ranger is a very good spec to start with, I would say. The best from the medium armor classes, I would say, when it comes to how easy it is to learn. I would say Core Guardian is very easy to learn. You have just the virtues, and the virtues are just passives, and if you activate them, you get just a short time buff. That's, I would say, quite easy to learn. I think Guardian, very straightforward, plays like a priest or something like that. Paladin, really easy, I would say. Nothing more to say about that. Dragon Hunter is a step up, I would say. It's harder to play because you have the virtues that now get an active skill that is way more, not annoying to use, but you have to focus a bit on it. You have your traps that get a little bit more intricate rather than just pressing one button and shouting, for example, advance or something like that. So I would say it's still easy, but it's a little bit a step up then to Core Guardian. Then we have Firebrand. Firebrand for me is hard because it has a lot of different buttons to press. It is very nice in the utility and flexibility it can bring, but that also means you have to learn a lot of stuff about when to use which kind of utility and when it's actually a waste. And it's very flexible. You can be played as a DPS, a support, you can be a full support, a healer, whatever. I feel like all of them can be useful in the right circumstance. So, but you have to understand when to use it. So that's why it's in hard. Yeah, Joe, I really appreciate your comment. Thanks a lot. So that's why I would put it in as a hard class to play if you start out Guild Wars 2. I would not start on a Firebrand if you're not really a big fan of the class design. It's way harder than people give it credit for. And then we have Willbender. I think Willbender is also quite easy actually. It's forced movement, yes, but it actually has a very nice utility in the kit with the teleports and the healing and stuff. So for me, I think Willbender is also quite easy. You can see a lot of classes go into easy tier that have some buttons to learn, but they carry you by their strength baseline. And that's why I would put Willbender here as well. It's quite easy to start out on a Willbender because the forced movement is not that much of a big difficulty in the beginning, and you can get so much done with it. Yeah, it's actually crazy. Is there any build in the game that you personally don't find easy? I mean, if I answer this question honestly, then I have to take into consideration that I played the game for way too much. You know, I played the game for over 13,000 hours in the last 12 years. So that means, well, 13 years. So that means it would be a shame if I'm a content creator and make build guides about every single build and would say I find a specific build still hard to play. Because I played every build way too long, and if I still find them hard to play, then I'm either really bad at the game or I'm just a very slow learner. Yeah, and I would say both is not the case. So in my opinion, I personally don't find any class hard. But that's the important part here. We are talking here in this tier list about new players. So we are not talking about what I personally think about the class right now in my current gameplay situation, but I'm talking about what would I recommend new players when I would consider how hard a class or how easy a class it is to learn. Yeah, that's my take here. I think Core Warrior is very easy to learn. Very straightforward. You have one F skill, you have a lot of weapons, but all of them are very straightforward. You're very physical, not very much going on, no magic. Very easy, no teleports and that kind of stuff. Just very straightforward class. What can I say? Then we have Berserker. Berserker gets a little bit more difficult, but still not medium, I would say. Yeah, not medium, because you have a very spammy playstyle, but it still is warrior. It's still very straightforward. It's a very physical skills, very maybe a bit more fast-paced, but still very nice to learn. It's not too difficult. You also have very crazy good traits that help you survive. So overall, I would say still a very nice class to pick. Then we have Bladesong. Bladesong, I would say, is medium for me because it's a little bit annoying with the gun saber and how you use your dragon trigger and that stuff. It's a little bit less intuitive how you actually interact with that. You lose your second weapon set for the gun saber. I think it's definitely the hardest warrior spec for sure to play. It's still not hard because you still have very straightforward skills, but it's definitely harder to play as well with the float generation. It's not that easy to actually get into. Then we have Spellbreaker. I think Spellbreaker is actually very easy. You have the full counter and that's it. Everything else is very straightforward, just like a core warrior, just with a full counter. That's why it's a very easy class to play actually. Yeah. Let's start with Core Revenant. I think Core Revenant is medium. That's already saying a lot because you have the energy mechanic that you have to take care of. You have the legend, so you can't swap your utility skills that easily. For me, it's therefore medium. It's not getting carried by easy class mechanics. It's actually going up because of the hard class mechanics that I think a Core Revenant has. Then on the other hand, we have Herald. I think Herald has the same thing. You have the flip over skills, you have the energy that you have to manage. I think for me, it's also medium. You have to learn a lot of stuff that is very different to a lot of different things that you would expect from other classes. So if you compare to Guardian, to Warrior, they are awesome heavy armor classes, but they have very straightforward mechanics for the most part. But Herald is already different than them. Yeah. I agree. I might agree with you actually there, Toxio. That it's you get, because of that you can't swap your skills around all the time because you are locked in with the legend. It makes it easier. Maybe you're right. Maybe that makes it easier to actually learn. Maybe you're right there because you don't have to have the decision. The decision is not made. The decision is made for you by the game. You have to swap legends. And then it's done. You can't swap purely your utility skills. Maybe that's a good point here. I mean, would you really say, Syntrax, that Berserker is medium? Would you really say that Berserker is that much harder to play than the very, very easy Core Warrior? Because I feel like you get another button with the Berserk form, but is it really changing that much? Because I get that, why you say it's actually... Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm too biased because I'm, an experienced veteran in all the game. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have to adjust my warriors placement here. Maybe you're right. My Bladesong is too low, and my Berserker maybe as well. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I would say Spellbreaker and Core Warrior I think is completely the same. You can play a Spellbreaker and just have one more button than the Core Warrior. That's it, and it's really playing like the same. Yeah, I agree. I think the flow mechanic of Bladesong makes it very confusing to learn because you don't have adrenaline anymore. It's a little bit different. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I were a little bit too biased towards, it's just saying spam your buttons and you will succeed. Maybe that's correct. Maybe a new player wouldn't know which button to spam. Yeah, so I guess that's fair. Well, thanks for the adjustment. Thanks. I would change it now as well. Yeah. But I think we were talking about Revenant. I think it's really hard. Would you say Revenant is easy to play because you get legends that are really clearly defining what kind of skills you use? Or is it hard to play because the legends lock you into a playstyle that you might not know how to actually play, or the energy is not really, really well to do? I think it's really hard for me to actually judge that for a new player. I think for me, Herald and Core Revenant are quite straightforward if you understand the energy mechanic. That's the real thing. If you get the energy mechanics, they are actually quite nice. But it's really hard. I don't know where to place them. I have to be honest. For me, I would say Vindicator is clear higher than Herald and Core Rev. Is it medium or is it hard? I would say it's hard because of the alliance stance, and you have, so to say, 3 stances at the same time. So I think for me, it's a little bit different to play. But yeah, it's always a matter of perspective. Yeah, that's a very good point there. But what can you say, you know, if a new player asks me which kind of Revenant spec they should start out with, I would say it's Herald. So that means probably Herald is the easiest of them to learn, if I would say that just without thinking about it too much. I think Renegade has very high energy consumption, and the spirits that you can summon are also not that easy actually to understand them. You have the instant cast one, and after you use the first one, I think it's confusing. Renegade is not that straightforward in comparison to Herald and Core Revenant, I would say. I would actually say, yeah. I don't think Renegade is the hardest. I think Vindicator is the hardest, because you get the Alliance stance, and the Alliance stance is not something that a new player typically wants to have in the kit, because the Alliance stance has two stances baked in that are somewhat not that straightforward. Maybe it's not hard if you compare it to the other things. I think it's really hard to judge where to put them. I would now leave them for now in medium. I think they are harder to play than Herald and Core Revenant, but I wouldn't say it's very clear cut which of them is harder to pick. I think for a new player, it's very dependent on what kind of playstyle you are actually performing it on. Yeah, I would agree with Errol that the Renegade takes so much energy just when you use your F skills and also the spirits, that it's actually quite hard to play, because you get all your defensive skills will get punished by using your, for example, the F3 skill, which costs I think 35 energy. It's insane. It costs so much energy. So I think the energy management on Renegade is really annoying for a new player, especially if you don't know how much it costs, or if you just can't really see it. I don't know. I'm not a big fan to recommend Renegade to a new player. Maybe you're right there. Maybe I have to put it. I don't know. I think it's not as hard as a Firebrand or a Bladesword. I think it's not. It's not. Because you can still get your stuff done even if you run out of energy. You're still a very strong, heavy armor class, I would say. But it's just, like I said, this is a tier list, and it's really hard for a veteran that plays all classes, all builds, to make a tier list for a new player and say, this is very hard, this is very easy, because it's always biased. You know, I have a biased view on the situation. I try to be very objective here, but it's really hard. So please bear with me here. Before we continue, I want to mention that only a small percentage of you are actually subscribed to my channel. So if you enjoy my content, and if you want to support one of the only left active content creators for Guild Wars 2, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But now back to the video. Okay, I think we talked enough about the heavy armor classes. Let's go to the light armor classes, which is, in my opinion, one of the harder ones. So let's start with Necromancer. I think Necromancer is quite easy. We have Core Necromancer. Core Necromancer gets a Shroud. For me, Core Necromancer is very easy. It's slow, yes, but it's not very hard to understand. You get the Shroud, which locks you out of a lot of skills. You don't have a lot of decisions to make. You have a second life pool. Overall, Necromancer, in my opinion, very easy to recommend to new player, because you don't have a lot of stuff to learn in comparison to other classes. That's the same actually for Reaper. I think Reaper is also very easy. It is not changing a lot. It's actually very straightforward to play. It's not very unique, yeah, in that sense that you have to learn a lot of new stuff that you would not expect to learn from a elite spec. I would say for me, it feels almost like Spellbreaker to Core Warrior, because you just alter your skills a little bit, but it's still very close to the original Core Necromancer. I don't know. On the other hand, we have Harbinger. I think Harbinger is changing the class mechanic in a way that makes it harder. Just straight up. I think Harbinger for me is, because of that, medium, because you get punished if you don't know what you're doing. You have a lot of forced movement. You have a lot of less life pool, and you still have to manage it. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's, for me, in medium, maybe. Yeah, it's in medium for me, Harbinger. And then we have Scourge. Scourge is also very easy, I would say, because you lose your Shroud and you get less buttons in that way. You have less skills to learn. You have your F skills and all your really normal builds that you play in PvE are very straightforward. You don't have a lot of weapon swapping going on. You have very straightforward skills. I think Necromancer might be one of the easiest classes to recommend to a new player because of how easy it is to learn with everything regarding the Shroud, I would say, except Harbinger, because you actually have to manage the blight stacks and that kind of stuff that can be quite punishing. Yeah. I would say that makes Harbinger in medium tier with the blight. I think that's the difference maker here. Yeah. But like you already mentioned, of course, it's very subjective. Everyone might feel different. So for example, if someone is an assassin by heart, you know, and plays Thief very easily, then they might think, okay, Thief is easier to play than a Necromancer. It's very hard to justify. It's always subjective. But personally, I think that's... Yeah, maybe you would put Scourge in easy, not in very easy. Maybe. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's a little bit harder to play because it has, with the shades, you have more mechanics to take care of. Yeah, maybe you have more things to take care of while you press your buttons. That's probably true. Yeah. I think Echo Fox is correct here. DPS Scourge is very easy, but if you play Heal Scourge, you have a lot more to take care of because you have to think about when to apply your barrier, where to stand to give your allies the barrier. So I would put it in easy just because of that there are builds out there that make this a little bit harder. But maybe it's a close one to very easy. It's not as hard as an Untamed, that much is for sure. Then we have Elementalist. So Elementalist, we talked about it a lot on stream. Is Elementalist hard to recommend to new player? Baseline, because you have so many elements and so many skills to learn for every single weapon. Is it hard because of that? I would say it is not hard because of that. It has a higher barrier of entry, but it's not so high that I would say don't play that as a new player. It can be fun and challenging to a new player. I think what's more the problem is that a light armor class has a low health pool, and that's more problematic. So I think that's why I would put it in medium, because you have a light armor class, low health pool, a lot of skills to learn. The kit that you have is actually very helpful. I would say Core Elementalist is for me not hard. It's medium because it's just a lot to take in. It's not crazy hard to actually understand. It's not, you have elements and that's it. You know, it's not like you have to understand energy management while you have 20 skills to learn. I think I would put it in medium, in maybe high medium. You could make an argument to put it in hard. But let's think about it. Tempest is, because of that, also medium. Because you have the overlords that have a long charge time. So that means that you have problems if you get CC'd, if you don't have this ability trait and stuff. So for me, Tempest is also medium because you have the elements, and I would say Tempest is easier than Core Elementalist because it's like Scrapper and Core Engie, because they are somewhat, if you understand the core class, Tempest is not hard. But if you don't understand the core class, then it actually gets hard. You know, that's the thing. So Tempest overall is easy to learn if you get the core class. It's the same for Scrapper. So that's why it's lower than Core Elementalist. And then we have Catalyst. I think Catalyst is very brain AFK. You can just press all your buttons and you will have a lot of boons in all game modes actually. But to understand the class, you have to understand the mechanics with the combo fields, and that's a little bit hidden and not very straightforward. So I would say that is for a new player to play hard because it's somewhat challenging to get the APM going while still playing and understanding what you actually are doing. You know, I think you can face roll a lot with Catalyst, so it's like Untamed, but to actually understand what you are doing, to play it to its fullest, it's actually hard. So maybe because of its brokenness, I have to put it in medium tier, because it's actually not as hard to perform in, even though if you don't understand anything about the class, you will still get your stuff working quite well, because you can just spam it and it's so broken. So it's really hard again to justify where to put it. It's the same with Untamed. Would you say Untamed is hard to play? Yes. Is it broken? Yes. Where to put it now? I don't know. It's the same with Catalyst. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's really hard. I have to... Did those classes, Herald, Catalyst and Tempest, Catalyst and Untamed, for me, really hard to justify where to put them. If they are easy, medium, I don't know. I have a question about combo freeze. Can you blast Waterfield twice in quick succession? Yes, you can do that very fast. You can use 5 blast finishes in the same Waterfield very shortly and you get 5 healed procs. Yes, you can do that. As long as the Waterfield is still existing, of course. Yeah. Yeah, then we have Weaver. Weaver is obviously hard because of the dual tuning. It's hard to learn, but it's not giving you a new class mechanic to learn other than the dual tuning. So I think it's not very hard in that way because it's still understandable what it actually does. You don't lose access to your classical core Elementalist skills. You just get one new skill for each dual attunement. So that's why I would put it in hard, not in very hard to learn actually. Yeah. Yeah, maybe you're right. If you explain Untamed very well, it's actually not that hard. I would say that's the same goes for Herald in my opinion, because if you explain what a Herald does, you can explain it in 2 sentences and people will actually know what they are doing with it. So yeah. Let's talk about Mesmer. Mesmer is interesting. I think the core concept of a Mesmer is somewhat easy because your clones can help you a lot. You have illusions, you have a lot of instant casts, so it's hard to master, easy to get into, I would say. Yeah. Core Mesmer is not very good in a solo scenario, so maybe it's because of that you start out as a Core Mesmer, you have not a lot of DPS and you are also quite squishy, so maybe because of that you have to put it medium and your utility skills are just very, very bad. For you alone, you don't have a lot of stuff that helps you, you have just Blink and that's it, I would say. It's hard to justify where to put Core Mesmer actually. On the other hand, we have Virtuoso. I would say Virtuoso is easy because you lose your clones, you get your blades, and that you have high range. I would say that's easy. You can play a Condi, Power, Virtuoso, whatever you want. All of them are very decent to play. Very easy, yeah. The leveling on Mesmer is hard, that's why I put it here. But if you reach the stage that you can get Virtuoso, you are actually very, very good. You know, there will be a great time ahead of you if you're in solo content. Even in instant content, it's really good. It's just very flexible. Yeah, it's actually true. The leveling on Mesmer is actually one of the hardest classes to level because you have so little damage and you get so much damage and your utility skills are just very, very bad. As well, for example, also the elite skill is completely useless for the most part. So yeah, if you can use the spear, then it's different. But people might start out without Soto and then without Chantia Waltz and you don't have the spear, and then it's very painful. Then we have Chronomancer. So Chronomancer is interesting. I think Chronomancer is really, really good in PvE right now. But you have the Continuum split. Is the Continuum split something that makes Mesmer hard? Or is it something that is not changing too much about it? Because the mechanic itself is explained in 1 sentence. Yeah. Is it hard to execute perfectly? Yes. Is it hard to execute somewhat okay? Not really. You just press F5 and that's it. For me, I think it's medium. I think it's not justifying to go in hard tier because it's very easy actually to understand what it does. You just go back and reset your cooldowns. A lot of games have a mechanic like this nowadays. It's not very special. The positioning is a problem, I agree. That makes it maybe a little bit harder. Maybe you are right there. The positioning can be painful. If you are in Bone Skinner and you use the F5 in the wrong moment, you will die. That's true. Yeah, I mean, yes, you can use it, of course, in a moment where it doesn't matter and you just waste the skill. That's also true. But I feel like it's not as hard as people always think, because you can just spam your skills while you are in F5 and you will get some value out of it. Yeah. It rewinds the cooldown and the position, so that means you have to position correctly when you press it. Yeah, maybe because of that you have to put it in hard. But I feel so bad to put it in hard because it's so good right now. It's, you know, you just have to press your buttons and you will perform decently well with it. It's like saying, okay, it's hard if you want to master it, but to actually get into it, it's actually, I don't know. I think maybe low end of hard, maybe. And then we have Mirage. Mirage is again so weird to put into something here because you can play a staff Mirage and you just spam your dodges and it's very easy. Yeah, it's really, really easy. But if you want to play an X Mirage or something like that, it gets into very hard. So where to put it? I don't know. I really don't know. Where should I put it? Would a new player play staff? Probably, because it's very easy to learn and to play. So because of that, you could make an argument to put it there. But yeah, you also have Torch 4. That helps a lot, actually. That's true. Conti Cleanse and the Stealth Access. But if you play an Power Mirage or an X Mirage, it's actually very challenging because you have to know a lot about the class and other classes to actually play it. I would say it's medium for me because of that, because there are some really hard builds and there are some really easy builds, and that just in the middle brings it to medium. That's my argument here. I think it's harder to play than Virtuoso, I would say. Yeah, so let's put it in medium for now. Yeah, I would say Staff Conti Mirage is very easy, but that's the exception. Everything else on Mirage is actually not that easy, I would say. Yeah, maybe new players wouldn't use energy sitches, that's correct. Maybe then it's getting harder to actually play. I would put it in medium for now. Maybe you could make an argument because of how strong or how easy Staff Mirage is to put it in easy because of that. I think it has a lot of mechanics that are quite hidden. You have the ambush skill that is not very clear that you have to get it all the time when you dodge. You are not moving with your dodge anymore, so that's something different. You can cast stuff while you move, so that's also a value evade, that's also something new. It has a lot of new mechanics. The Mirage mirrors are new, so I would say overall it can't be that easy because of that. Yeah, I think this is my tier list, how I would rate the difficulty of classes for new player regarding how easy it is to learn them. But like I said, this is a perspective from a veteran that plays all classes, so that can be scuffed. I did on purpose put nothing in very hard because I feel like even as a new player, there is no class that you shouldn't play if you enjoy the fantasy. I really want to stress that. You can play every single elite spec as a new player and will succeed with it. Some, like the hard ones here, will be more challenging, but you will still be able to clear almost any PvE content with them. So please, that's really important to understand. And I think if you want to start out with an easy class, yes, go for very easy or easy, but it's not like it's a necessity to actually enjoy the game. I think it's way more important to start on a class that is actually fun to you. The playstyle is something for you, the class fantasy is something for you, and then you will have more fun, even if you have to learn, for example, more than a class that isn't very easy. Yeah, that's very, very important to make the statement. So if you're a new player and listening to this, please take that really to your heart and really think about that before you choose a class, and not say, okay, this content creator said I should play this class because it's easy. Think about if you like the class. That's way more important. I hope you enjoyed this tier list. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. And if you're having trouble deciding which class to play, this video will help you decide which class to start with in Guild Wars 2 by showcasing and explaining every single class and elite spec that Guild Wars 2 has to offer right now. Thanks to all my supporters on YouTube, Twitch and Patreon. Thanks Malice, thanks Lane, and I hope to see you all in the next video.